Morning and welcome everyone to the Police, Fire and Rescue Subcommittee meeting. Before we start, I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be recorded and that the recording will subsequently be available for public listening. Before we proceed to today's business items, as Chair, I firstly would like to advise members that Hamish McGee, Senior Local Officer for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, has requested permission to take a few photographs during today's proceedings. Our Legal and Democratic Services Manager has confirmed to me that, subject to members' agreement, this can be done for the purpose of specific items on today's agenda, which will become self-evident shortly as we run through the business. Can I therefore ask members if they have any objections? Okay, we can move on. I'm sure the committee would wish to acknowledge the work of John Syme as the former chair of this subcommittee. John ensured that Dumfries and Galloway's voice was heard and brought influence to the way in which police and fire services have been shaped in recent times. I would ask that the Director writes to John and to express our appreciation and best wishes for the future. As Chair and on behalf of all subcommittee members, I am delighted to be able to recognise the excellent work of Scottish Fire and Rescue staff across our region on an ongoing basis. Today, however, I have great pleasure in highlighting Watch Commander Kenneth Simmons, who's sitting alongside Hamish, who has recently been awarded the Queen's Fire Service Medal. Welcome to the subcommittee, Kenneth. And I am sure some of you will already know Kenneth, as he has served communities across Scotland for almost 4 decades, following in the footsteps of his father, his uncle, who were also in the fire and rescue service here in Dumfries and Galloway. Currently a crew manager at Dumfries Fire Station and a retained watch manager in Annan, Kenneth's long-term commitment to his work as a firefighter, including responding to the Lockerbie disaster, and his work across retained duty systems, has been recognised in him being awarded the Queen's Fire Service Medal. This subcommittee will be well aware of the vital role played by the retained fire and rescue staff across the communities in our largely rural area, and I would now like to invite the subcommittee to join me in thanking Kenneth, paying tribute to his distinguished service and to thoroughly congratulate him on his award. Thank you. Now move on to item 1, Sederunt and apologies.
Good morning, everyone. We have 9 members present. We are quorate, and I have apologies from Councillor Stitt and Councillor Blake.
Thank you, and move on to declarations of interest. Any members have a declaration of interest? No, thank you. Moving on then to item 3, delegation to Police, Fire and Rescue Subcommittee, report by Director of Corporate Services. Nick Evans is not here to speak to the report, although Derek will if required. And the recommendation is that we note the remit of the Police, Fire and Rescue Subcommittee as detailed in paragraph 3.2. Are we content to do this? Thank you. Moving on to item 4, Police, Fire and Rescue Subcommittee, appointments to outside bodies, report by Director of Communities. Derek Crichton is here to speak to the report, which outlines the connection between this subcommittee and Police Scotland V Division, and recommends the appointment of both the Chair and the Vice Chair of this subcommittee to the Quality Improvement Group. I'll move directly to recommendations unless any member is otherwise minded. No, thank you. So the recommendation, agree to appoint Chair and Vice Chair to the Continuous Improvement Group as detailed in paragraph 367. Yep. Move on to item 5, Police Scotland, Dumfries and Galloway Local Plan 12-month performance update, 1st of April 2016 to 31st of March 2017, report by Director of Communities. We move on to the Police Scotland V Division Annual Performance Report. Gary Ritchie, who's just taking her seat, is Chief Superintendent and Local Commander, and he is here to introduce the report to you. Over to you, Gary. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks very much to everybody. I see new faces for us this year, and I'm looking forward to working with you all. I'm delighted to be able to come along here today and speak about what I think is a very, very good performance report for us over the previous year. Crime fluctuates, obviously. That's a point I'm going to come on to in a second. And what you see in front of you shows comparisons based on the previous year. I suppose, there's some areas where you could look at, particularly in percentages, that look a bit dramatic in terms of either being higher or lower than it was last year. Very few of these, but in actual fact, over the piece, over a longer period, what we're seeing generally is the type of fluctuations that you would expect to see. So I'm quite happy that what we're seeing is good performance and good steady performance in relation to crime stats and the stats that you're presented with in the report. And I think it's important to note that is against a background of huge change last year that we underwent locally in Dumfries and Galloway Division. We reduced 20% of our operational leadership. We took a completely different approach to the way that we tackled the problems in the area, and we took a whole new approach to community policing because I felt it was important, and indeed this committee and members of the council and other partners felt it was important that we change the way that we engage with our communities and improve the way that we engage with our communities. And that was something that when I took up post was evident to me that we needed to address. So that's what we've done, and I expected it to be quite an unsettled year. I did say to this committee in the first time I appeared here that because of that we might actually see a bit of a hit in some of our performance areas. We didn't see that, and I was very pleased that was the case. I think because of the fact that I'm here with what I consider as a strong report, it's probably the right time for me to speak about a few caveats, and I've already spoken with the chair on this in respect to this report, and that means it doesn't look as if I'm trying to make excuses before we even get into it. What you see in front of you is mainly crime stats. Crime accounts for less than 20% of our business, and I have an issue with that, to be honest with you. That what we're actually sitting and scrutinising here today accounts for, or doesn't take account of about 80% of what police officers are doing on a day-to-day basis. I would like to bring to this committee a bit more information round about what the police are actually doing on a day-to-day basis in your communities. We are unfortunately governed by the fact that this is a standard report that's presented to scrutiny boards all over the country. I've made some representations, as have some of my colleagues in other areas, to suggest that we actually look to alter that, enhance it, improve it, perhaps show the comparison over longer periods, bring some more information about what we're doing in communities. And that is being looked at. But I also think it would be helpful if we had some advocacy from the committee itself. And as I say, I have discussed that with the chair, and that might be something that we'll look to develop over the coming or the next year or two. If there are some regulatory provisions that prevent us from doing that, there shouldn't be anything that prevents me from bringing addendums to this report. And with your agreement, that would be something that I would like to do in any case. But what I would rather do is have a better and a standard report that more accurately reflects our business. So that's just to put out there that that's what I'm going to be working on, hopefully with the chair and this committee over the coming year. the figures, as I said before, are compared year in year, and I think the narrower the period of comparison, the less accurate that comparison is. Crime fluctuates, and it fluctuates, I suppose, over a standard deviation over a longer period. I'm not sure that it's particularly valuable to spend an awful lot of time looking at little peaks or little troughs in various areas, and what we should actually focus on are emerging problems and things that are well outside the norm. The data is important, but that's what we should be focusing on rather than the normal fluctuations that you expect to see. And that's why, as an organisation, Police Scotland is moving away from that strong reliance that we've seen in the last few years on statistical types of measure. And there will be no numerical or statistical targets in the local police plan that I'll present later this year for that reason. I'd far rather be able to talk more about our proactivity and the work that we're doing in communities and bring that type of data to you. But again, that's something that I suppose we need to discuss as a committee, and it will be with your agreement that we do that. So, in summary about the report, there's plenty I could talk about in here. I would far rather talk about what you want to talk about. So just in summary, I would say we remain one of the lowest crime rates per head of population in the whole of Scotland. We remain one of the highest detection rates in the whole of Scotland, and in many of our crime categories, not only do we have the best detection rate, that we're far and away ahead of even the next best. So I'm really proud to say that Dumfries and Galloway is still one of the safest places to live in Scotland, and I can reassure you that it's going to be absolutely my focus to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you for your frankness in relation to the nature of the report, and hopefully we can work together to move that forward. We now move on and open the meeting to members' debate. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to hear that, Dumfries and Galloway Constabulary had a good record compared to the rest of Scotland historically, so it's good to hear that the same is continuing under Police Scotland, that they're still performing above average. You spoke about this being a standard report. Now, this is not something you probably have any control of, but one of the things I would like to see in it would be things like the average response times to 101 and 999 calls, and how many calls will actually go unanswered. I know there's been a lot of public interest in that over the last couple of years. And I'd also be interested in the number of police officer and civilian staff who are based in this division, because we hear a lot about police numbers across Scotland or civilian staff numbers across Scotland, but I'd like to be reassured that Dumfries and Galloway are getting our fair share and that we're maybe not losing out to other areas of Scotland. I just wondered, is that a possibility in terms of the way the report could be refined in future?
Well, I think this is exactly the type of information and comment that I should be taking back to the Force Executive, in an effort to try and get the report to reflect exactly what you want to see here. As I say, regardless of what the decision is in respect to the standard report as we go forward, I'd be quite happy to present that information as an addendum to this in the future. So I can get that and I can bring it back to future committees, either or. But I, like you, would far rather see that as part of the standard report.
Councillor Bell.
I've been elected member for 10 years in office, Dumfries, and I'm starting to attend the community council. It's nice to see that actually turn up to community council and giving community feedback. One thing I'm quite concerned about, obviously, it's about this airgun licensing. We're not hearing much about this because I know a lot of police officers are actually processing application forms for the airgun licence. I know it's a totally unnecessary legislation that's put down by the Scottish Government, but I'm just wondering how much time is this Galloway division actually processing these applications? Have any idea, the indication of 2 to 3% of officers' time or 5%? That's what I'd like to know, because the public need to know about this as well.
I don't have figures. It has been, all the weapons legislation actually has been quite a significant demand, particularly on our community officers over the last couple of years. I've actually made provisions locally to try and lessen that demand on the community officers by bringing some of the work into the centre, because a lot of it's about checking systems and background checks and things like that the community officers were having to do, and that was where the time was spent. So I now have a facility locally at Cornwall Mount that does that for them, so that's freed up a bit of time. I'm also looking to, and what I have done over the past year is try and get some support from central resources who operate in Dumfries and Galloway. Police officers I'm speaking about, but we do have police officers who are part of roads policing and are part of our firearms cadre, who are not Dumfries and Galloway resources. They're Police Scotland resources, but they operate in Dumfries and Galloway. And what I'm looking to do is actually use some of these officers as well in their downtime to do some of the licensing, which would free up our community officers as well. You're absolutely right, it's a significant drain. I wouldn't like to put a figure on it because I would just be making a guess. But with the same token, if you want a kind of general indication from the officers themselves, the demand on them has lessened by about half over what we've done in the past year, and anything else would hopefully reduce it further.
Councillor Davison.
Thank you, Chairman. I absolutely agree with Gary about reporting. I mean, this is useful information without a shadow of doubt. Although there might be something to be gained by looking at a longer context that I think you were alluding to. I'm not suggesting that every emergency service should reflect the same reporting as every other one, because they're all different. But the perhaps 5-year trend data similar to what the Fire and Rescue Service do might actually be quite useful, because it would help iron out the issues of individual annual fluctuations and maybe point to broader trends that actually aid us in scrutinising what's going on and how the division and indeed the force is responding to those. I also think that what you're talking about in terms of wider reporting about the other activities that you're doing would be very helpful. I mean, just one, I guess in one sense, minor example, but nevertheless an important one, I think, taking my own ward, the introduction of police surgeries as, I guess, part of the way of looking towards doing community policing engagement, particularly when police counters were removed. Would be good to get some feedback, whether that's formal, informal. I mean, I think formal would be better, but nevertheless, one way or another, on maybe what the uptake of those has actually been, how that's kind of feeding through. Do we have intelligence on whether it's beneficial for the communities that they're being trialled in? Is it proving beneficial actually for the officers who are doing it? You know, that I think sort of thing would actually be quite useful for us to get a feel for. I think it would also be very much in line with the priority that certainly the predecessor committee to this placed on community policing, which I suspect we will wish to continue as a new committee. So I think certainly we should be very much supportive of your aim to be bringing more than the statistical analysis. I mean, that's valuable, but I've always taken the view that actually in pretty much every committee I've served on in the council, never mind scrutiny committees of emergency services, that narrative background about the broader picture very often helps us to scrutinise and gives us a more rounded picture of what's going on. So I don't know if we're going to incorporate that in recommendations, but I think it would be a good way forward.
Thanks very much for your comments there. It just completely reflects what I was speaking about. I think it would be helpful that there is a local group for the West Region of Police Scotland, where the local police commanders and the chairs of the various scrutiny boards come together, and they do that for the East and the North as well. And I spoke to the chair beforehand to say that that's probably the forum for us to raise that. If it's agreeable to the committee, I can prepare a paper based on the comments that you've made here today for submission to that, and whenever the next meeting is going to be. I think there's one scheduled for the next couple of weeks, which is unfortunate scheduling because it's recess, so I'd imagine that will be reorganised for fairly soon after the end of recess. But I can prepare something and share it with yourself, Chair, and with the rest of the committee as a request for it to be formally examined with the force.
Yes, committee happy with that? Okay. Councillor Lever.
Yeah, I think it would be important to actually show what work the police force does outside of just crime detection. I think, for the local communities, it would be reassuring as well. And in terms of comparison with other divisions, if you look at item 7, page 65 onwards, the bar chart showing where we actually stand relative to other local authorities. Obviously, in the case of the police, it would be relative to other divisions. I think that's also quite useful because the press and people pick up on where we stand, but we have no sort of comparison as to where we stand nationally. And I think one of the Deputy Chief Constables before Police Scotland was set up at one of these meetings said that in terms of crime, one street in Glasgow has a higher crime rate than all of Dumfries and Galloway. I think we need to make that obvious when this data is presented to ourselves and to the public. So if we could look at something along that sort of lines as well. And in terms of the community safety team, how closely do the police work with the community safety team? And on page 16 it says about many of the complaints about antisocial behaviour are received out with the operating hours of the community safety team. Is an opportunity to change the hours of the community safety team to address the peak of these complaints?
Taking your first point, we have as an organisation steered away from making comparisons across divisions and beyond me making general comments about where we stand in respect to crimes against per head of population and those kind of averages that you would tend to see. Going into further detail about crimes, one street in Glasgow, you're absolutely right, one street in Glasgow will have a higher crime rate than Dumfries and Galloway. Therefore, I'm not entirely sure of the value of comparing Dumfries and Galloway with Glasgow. Two completely different worlds. Perhaps in another rural crime area we could do that, but it gives a wee bit of context. But again, I'm not entirely sure that there's great value in that. I think the context should be about what we actually achieve in the division. Different societies, different areas. I don't think. I've worked all over Scotland. And I mean this in a good way. I don't think there's anywhere quite like Dumfries and Galloway, and we should be proud of that. We do these comparisons just to tell us what we already know, actually. So that I think that's been the feeling, and that's why you don't see that kind of comparison in this report. However, if you want me to bring in a more of that general kind of context in my comments in this report, then that's something that I could do. In respect to your second point about the community safety team, we work very closely with the community safety team. I actually think that the relationship that we have just now is positive, and even though there's stuff happens out with ours, and I'm sure Mr. Crichton will share the view here, that the communication between the two and the close working relationship isn't compromised by that in any way. It's something I suppose that we could look at, but I'd imagine we'd be doing that kind of review through the course of the year anyway, especially when problems arise that we need to address. And I know that there's good flexibility with the community safety team in that respect as well.
You wishing to come back, Councillor Leo?
Yeah, it's just, I think the comparison is quite important in terms of reassuring the public, because they tend to pick up their perception of how high the crime rate is from reading the local newspapers. And if you know yourself at time, they portray Dumfries and Galloway as being a hellhole of crime, and it's the Sodom and Gomorrah, effectively, of Western Europe. So I do think we need to have some way in which we can actually reassure the public that crime is very low within Dumfries and Galloway. So I'll leave it to you as to how you do it.
I absolutely understand your point. Again, I suppose just to bring the force position in here, as you're comparing against somebody that's not doing so well, therefore that kind of reassurance message that they are doing positive work in the other areas can be lost. By saying, well, in actual fact, you're not actually as good as Dumfries and Galloway. Very few places are. So that can be a bit of an issue as well. But I absolutely take your point, and it's something that I'll look at. I'll try and find a way that we can bring that kind of context without having the negative element of it.
Thank you, Gary. Councillor Bell. Apologise, Councillor Howie.
Commander, you talked about trying to address emerging trends. Obviously, something very topical is Brexit, and both the Irish government and British government not wanting a hard border between their two countries, which would suggest that the hard border may well be pushed to Cairnryan. Is this something that is on your radar?
I tried to anticipate questions today. That was quite one of them. No, to be perfectly honest with you, and it's an interesting point. There is a national team looking at implications of Brexit for the force, which I'd imagine will be wide and varied. That's one of them, I guess. But I haven't been approached or spoken to about that. It's probably just a wee bit too early in the development for that to have come across my desk yet. But it's a really interesting point, and I appreciate you raising it.
I'm sure it is. Thank you.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple of questions, actually, specific questions on the report. One of those on the stop and search issue. I have to say that the statement on the national position that it had been previously acknowledged that this data is not 100% accurate, given that somebody had deleted tens of thousands of records by pressing the wrong button on a computer, is an understatement, shall we say. However, I just wondered that, in terms of the stop and search of children and young people, the statutory requirement changed, and it has to be statutory stop and search only. I just wondered how that had affected, or if that had affected stop search success, if you like, in Dumfries and Galloway. And the other issue I wanted to ask you about was on substance misuse. And again, at a UK level, new psychoactive substances are now illegal, and whether you're detecting much of that in Dumfries and Galloway.
On your first point about stop and search, I absolutely agree with you 100%. And we now have, on the basis of the new statutory provision, we're now in the process of training all our officers on that and the implications of that. We don't do consensual or non-statutory searching of young people anymore at all. The effect that it's had. I think the practice in Dumfries and Galloway, even during the early part of Police Scotland, where stop and search was pushed forward as a very strong intervention tactic. My view from speaking, because I wasn't here at the time, but having spoken to the officers who were, was that it wasn't a practice that was really readily adopted here anyway. So we didn't see I suppose we didn't see the behaviours and the practice, or the negative element of the practice that I think caused so much concern to the same extent in this area. So it's not as big a step back for the officers here. I think everywhere police officers took a wee bit of a dent in their confidence in using their stop search powers because of the level of criticism that was levelled at the force. And I'm hopeful that the new statutory provisions and our training will increase their confidence to use it. We have a 1 in 3 success rate, which is very high for stop search, and I think that demonstrates to me and gives me confidence that the officers are using their powers appropriately, and it's having an effect on it. And your second point there, sorry, I never wrote it down.
It was actually about the new psychoactive substances, which used to be called legal highs, which UK legislation has ensured that they are no longer legal, and whether you're detecting much of that activity here.
Yeah, no, in comparison, no. We don't have an awful lot here. We don't have head shops here like we do in other areas. So it's it's less of a problem. That's not to say we don't have them. We do see them, but I don't think to the same extent as they have in the more urban areas.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Chair. Gary, I'm really actually happy to see that one of the things you put into place straight away when you came in was you reassigned the resources to where people stay. I think that stands us in good stead, and I have to agree with Councillor Bell and I both represent the same ward, and the two community officers there are very visible, and that's a commendation. What the question, I've got two questions actually. One is, what was really handy for us would be a breakdown on how you've assigned the resources. You know, what percentage of your force are in community policing, what percentage are in, I appreciate you didn't cover traffic anymore, I think, if I'm right. You know, many are in the CID. You know, how do you divide up your resources? I think would be interesting statistic for us. And the other bit really, and I'm kind of looking for a bit of guidance, because on page 15, the definition of serious assault appears to have changed. Now, is that a reporting process, or is that a legal process? Because it requires any skin fixing techniques such as sutures, gluing, or paper sutures, but it used to be broken bones or stitches, or life-threatening injury. I think I'm kind of looking at. It's a long time since I was at Tullyhilland, but I'm just trying to find out there. You know, is it's quite an all-encompassing statement, that, and you know, for example, how many of the assaults on emergency workers actually are serious in the old definition as opposed to the new definition, right? And how many would, for example, would be aggravated by the use of weapons or something else. And I think that's the kind of stuff, it's the things that the paper pick up badly on, and I think if it, to be proactive and tell us exactly what that would be helpful, I would suggest.
A serious assaults took a jump last year in the early part of the year, and that was exactly the question I asked. And I think at the time there was a good half dozen, which the previous year would not have been serious assaults. Just pure, and that's a definitional thing. It's not a legal thing. It's part of the Scottish Crime Recording Standard, which is constantly reviewed, and how we actually record our statistics, and the definitions of which are reviewed. So that was where that definition actually comes from, the Scottish Crime Recording Standard. So serious assaults have gone up right across the country. Sorry.
So basically, what you're saying here is the reporting of an assault which is considered serious is separate from the crime of serious assault, or it's a modern take on it, isn't it? It's not serious assault anymore, but that's an aggravation to assault, isn't it? The seriousness is an aggravation. So how is that accounted for nowadays?
This is, I mean, when you go to court, the crime's assault with an aggravation, you know, and that's presented. In terms of your crime recording standard, we separate assaults into serious, common assault, as we call it, and we've also got that third category, as you spoke about there, which is assault on emergency workers. So there's no double counting in that. If that's what you're getting, there's different. These are all different crimes, and they're just categorised in this way. So if an emergency worker was assaulted and fell within the definition of a serious assault, that crime would be recorded as a serious assault rather than categorised as an assault on an emergency worker, which can skew the figures, as you can imagine. Aye. So, this debate goes on in respect to the Scottish Crime Recording Standard, and this will not be the last change, I suspect.
Thank you, Gary. Councillor Charteris.
Well, I'm very pleased to see that the priorities are being achieved, but I picked up somewhere that there was a sixth priority to be placed in the plan. This was after, of course, the local plan had been approved at full council. And I read somewhere that there was an additional one priority, which was to protect our most vulnerable people, was to be added to the 5 which are listed here.
Yes, that's right. That does it as one of our local priorities, and it'll be part of the next police plan. In terms of what we can report on in that, it's encompassed within, I suppose, the you know, our domestic abuse reporting, which is concluded in here. But as far as producing other figures on that, this is kind of what I'm getting at. You know, the reporting convention here doesn't really allow us to expand in that to any great degree. I would like to talk about engagement and proactivity that we have with vulnerable people. Some of the information that we spoke about there in terms of having engagement with our local communities through our surgeries. That would be the kind of information I would like to include under that particular priority, which will also be included in this year's local plan. So I think the reason that you don't see much in there is because the regulatory provisions of this report limits us.
My other point, Chairman, was a plea for plain English when we read these, and sometimes it's quite difficult to understand. In some places, and I'll merely give you one example, on page 25 of 94, on public protection, the fourth paragraph, and it says approximately 70% of these result in child protection investigations, and a third being progressed in case reference. A recent review of 30 cases which were not progressed to IRD through the triage process identified only one that should have been an IRD, and again demonstrates the effectiveness of the MASH. It's actually difficult to understand what the paragraph is getting at, because there are so many acronyms in here, none of which mean anything to a reader who's not concerned in the police. It's difficult to actually understand what is said, and I make a plea, Chairman, for plain English to be used rather than lists of abbreviations which don't mean much, certainly to me.
Okay, I mean, we do define what these abbreviations are earlier on in that section. I think that the point that's trying to make there is to demonstrate the success of the multi-agency safeguarding hub. I nearly called it the MASH there, but that's what the MASH is. And so that's quite an important paragraph in that way. I can see where you're coming from in respect to the number of abbreviations, but we need to call these things something. And I think it's, you know, I don't really know how else we could present that other than wording it a wee bit better.
That's what I'm asking for, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Gary. Councillor Fairbairn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Gary. Very positive report in parts. I'd like to say, though, that I'm encouraged with the detection in dangerous driving up 29%. Is this intelligence-led, or is it proactivity, or is it a bit of both?
It's a bit of both, absolutely. I think it's one of the biggest problems, and this year we've seen an increase in the number of fatalities on our road, and so we are taking a very proactive stance against that, because it's honestly, if I was coming here and sitting here and telling you that was the number of murders that we had in the area, this would probably be my last meeting here, I would say. So it's absolutely our focus, and that started towards the end of last year, Councillor, and we saw a big rise in the number of detections towards the end of the year as we increased the focus. So yes, it's absolutely a bit of both. It's difficult to get intelligence on individuals. The intelligence and information obviously comes at the locations more than anything else, and we rely very much in the communities and yourselves obviously to highlight that to us. We know where the accident hotspots are. Unfortunately, this year a number of the accidents have come about from quite simply extremely bad driving. And we've had a number of multiple fatality incidents as well, which puts the figures up. So yeah, absolutely intelligence in respect to the locations, but there's a huge amount of education goes in the background of that as well.
Thanks for that, Gary.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just looking at the public protection part and the domestic abuse part, Gary, and what's striking me here is I know that your service has a huge role to play in the protection of vulnerable adults, and I kind of see in here any indicator, how many you refer, for example, for further assessment and further investigation, in fact, and then how many of them then come back to be investigated formally by yourselves or, in a lesser extent, social work team. And I'm kind of wondering if there's a way we could do that without identifying people. I think that would be the fear. But we've always done this for children, but we don't seem to do it for vulnerable adults to the same extent. And if the legislation is quite clear, as you're aware, we've an obligation to do certain things. And I would suggest that we should be looking at some way of reporting in there how many referrals your staff are making into the central hub, the MASH, because I think that might be a significant strain on your resource. If I'm taken from another meeting I used to be at as a councillor in consideration, so I'd be interested to see what you said about that.
No, it's a really good point, and exactly what I'm speaking about. And a point that was made earlier, the councillor as well, was that the information is not presented in a way that I think in any way reflects the actual demand and the resources that takes. The MASH is an adult MASH and a children's MASH now, so we have both sides of the business actually catered for there. The actual existence of that facility has seen the business increase as well, so it's not a victim of its own success, but I think it's actually building up a level of service that's way beyond what we've experienced before in respect to our vulnerable people. And you're right, we probably should find a way to actually represent that and bring that to this committee, and I'll add it to the list of suggestions that was made.
Thank you, Gary. Just one question from me under public protection again. The stat that we're given is the reduction in the detection rate for domestic violence. I suppose this highlights, perhaps deficiencies in the report because, there might not be a great number of instances of domestic violence. And I know the police work very, very hard in trying to reduce this particular crime. Is there any particular reason for the 8% reduction over the last year, or are we talking about small numbers here?
This is probably one that, there's smaller numbers than you would find elsewhere, so the percentage differences can look dramatic, but in actual fact, we have a lot of domestic incidents. So 8% is a bit of a fall. I don't see, a reviewing of our domestic incidents and a reporting and investigating of them is probably the tightest of any of our crime types. So I'm confident that we've detected as many as we possibly could. But what we have seen over recent years, I think, and it's a positive, is an increase in reporting the domestic abuse incidents and including historical domestic abuse incidents, which are, I suppose, obviously a bit harder to detect for that reason, and because we've, over time we can lose that immediate evidence that we require to detect it. So I think those are the kind of impact factors that are, but it's something that we keep a close eye on.
Okay, thank you. Well, we move on to the recommendation to scrutinise performance report of Dumfries and Galloway from Police Scotland for the period 1st April 2016 to 31st March 2017. Okay. Thank you, Gary. Thank you for coming along today, and also for your frankness in relation to the perceived deficiencies around the format of the report, and I'll look forward to working with you in terms of trying to seek improvements to that. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to item 6, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, Dumfries and Galloway Local Plan, 12-month performance update, 1st April 2016 to 31st March 2017. Hamish McGee, Local Senior Officer for Dumfries and Galloway, is here to speak to the report and answer questions members may have. Hamish, would you like to introduce the report before we go to questions?
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. A great pleasure in presenting this 12-month performance report. This is my first such annual report since taking up the LSO post in September of last year. If you will bear with me, I'd like to make a couple of initial comments and some observations with the report, and then I'll ask you if you have any questions. In general, can I just say that the overall performance of the area, particularly in relation to the rest of Scotland, which you'll see in the reports that are further on, is extremely good. You will have recognised this from the review document. I'd also wish to point out that when you're considering the actual numbers and the percentages that are based on them, that the increases are influenced by the fact that we are such a small level of activity in this area, and that's down to the proactivity of our service. One area of focus for us, though, is the deliberate primary fires. We had an unusual spike in November, December 2016, which you'll note from the report. We've worked very hard with our partners, particularly Police Scotland, and you'll note that that performance has improved, and we reduced the figures back down to what we'd expect to be normal. There's also a similar picture with deliberate secondary fires, and again, these are isolated incidents which have increased their figures. Again, working in partnership, we've managed to address these very quickly. On a really positive note, bonfire night, historically one of our busiest nights of the year, we had 5 instances of bonfires which we had to attend, which is, you know, a dramatic reduction and really great work in a partnership arena with the Council and with Police Scotland. Accidental dwelling fires have risen this year to levels similar to that of 2013-14. However, although the numbers have increased, the actual severity damage that are being caused during these fires has been dramatically reduced, and I'd like to think that's down to our home fire safety visits and the number of detectors, so early detection, early intervention, and we're bringing the severity of these fires down. The main causation factor within this is cooking, and we are doing proactive again within our community safety team to try and make people more aware, particularly the elderly, in the dangers of cooking. An area that we're having a sharp focus on, and is one of the areas identified as a priority within the new local plan, is false alarms, including UFAS, unwanted fire alarm signals. This figure shows both the success and a challenge for us. The success is that we're actually getting more and more of these early detection systems into domestic properties and into things like schools, hospitals, etc., etc. But what comes with that is the fact that we are getting more calls to those. And then as a result of that, it's more blue light journeys, provides, you know, a greater risk to communities because of our fire appliances going at high speed. And so we're working with people to bring that down. And again, we talk about that within our new local plan and the review. What I would say though is, you know, the figures in that report look like they're increasingly dramatically. If you look at it in consideration of the rest of Scotland, we're actually performing very, very well. I'd also like to point out that there was unfortunately 1 fire fatality in the area last year. This is a reduction from 3 in the previous year, but I don't count that as a success. Any fatality due to fire for me is a failure, and we will always strive to get a 0 figure on that one. And pleasingly, special services are down, and a lot of this has been again down to very good partnership working, particularly around road safety. And we'll keep an eye on this, particularly as our role is expanding out of hospital cardiac arrest and responding to other emergencies affecting injury, and supporting our colleagues in the ambulance services increasing, and that will see that figure impact. And what we'll have to do is provide you with greater context around what those figures are actually saying, because they're actually a positive in the fact that we're helping other agencies. Those are my kind of opening remarks. Obviously there's a lot more detail in the report. I'm quite happy now to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamish. I'll now open up to members' debate. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much. Just the first chance I've had him to say congratulations and welcome back. Nice to see. I appreciate this report on what's already been agreed, but I'm going to kind of jump a wee bit between the two things here, because there's a significant part of this about reducing fires and everything else, and it's the fire prevention and community involvement side of the service is fantastic, right? I have to say, you know, the attendance at open days, galas and stuff like that, and particularly the interaction with the children is out of this world, right? And that's where it starts. You know, the fire prevention thing starts with the kids. It doesn't start with the parents and grannies. And I'm wondering here whether we should be looking at, kind of like Gary before you, the amount of resource that you put in to that PR stroke fire prevention role should be contextualised here. We should get some idea, you know, how many hours or in a year that your staff are actually doing this really valuable work. And I think that would be, it's gone the days when they used to think they sat in the station waiting for a fire to come. We know that's not the case, right? But that was the perception for a long, long time. And I think if there's a way we can explain quite clearly and quite simply, you know, what you do when you're not attending fires, the other work that you do, that for me would be a key performance indicator in its own right. And I'd be really pleased to hear your views on that.
Firstly, Councillor Ferguson, thanks very much for the welcome back. It's good to be back. Back to an area I know very well. In terms of your fire prevention, you know, you're absolutely correct, and you know, that is one of our main focuses. Prevention is fire and rescue service. Yes, we do respond, but our primary role, we believe now, is prevention. And as such, then it becomes slightly difficult to actually quantify how much we put into that, because it is our role. I'd almost say to you that it's 99% prevention and 1% response, and every single member of the service, no matter where they are, that is their role. The other part of it is we're slightly more integrated in terms of our delivery mechanisms than Police Scotland. We do have a local senior officer area, but I tap into an awful lot of national resources, and therefore a lot of the things that we would do in the identification of that kind of prevention activity, a lot of that comes from the centre as well. But I take your point, and there is an opportunity, obviously, after we agree the new local plan, there will be a conversation around about the areas that you wish to scrutinise from that local plan, because remembering that this, at this moment in time, is the previous local plan. So we will have the ability to look at that, and I know nationally that we are currently looking at a suite of indicators that supports the new strategic plan, and we will be then therefore able to look at what is coming out of that and bring it to a local level. So your point's well made. I'm just not sure how well I'd be able to do it.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you. I mean, I presume this is a bit similar to the police performance report in the item before, because this is a standard report that you have to produce. But like Councillor Ferguson was saying, that it doesn't really reflect the activity of the fire service. I mean, I think fire service always has to be congratulated on its success here in Dumfries and Galloway, but you do a lot of things which are not reflected in this report, and in terms of prevention and so on. If there is a possibility of changing what's reported, like with the police, I think we should have issues like firefighter numbers, both full-time and retained, because obviously there are issues around the recruitment of retained staff, which we may want to discuss in the next item. And also issues like the response time to 999 calls. I think some of those would be key performance indicators in terms of, you know, both the public confidence, particularly with the relocation of the control centres, but also in a reassurance that that Dumfries and Galloway is not losing out in the numbers of firefighters or other staff which are actually deployed in our region.
There's a lot there. Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you about the context, about that we need to find a way in which to give a bit more. We try to do as much as we can within the standard template, as you've identified. There is scope for me, as Gary has, to bring you additional reports on the specific areas that you may wish to scrutinise or to get further information on. In terms of retained recruitment, yes, nationally that's an issue. I don't have the same issues locally. Dumfries and Galloway has always been a really good area for supporting the RDS. Yes, now and again, depending on a cycle, we will find a specific station where it's sometimes we have a little bit harder to recruit. But in general, no, I can't say that I have. And in terms of our confidence levels of availability of appliances, we're in the 99%, which is not the same across Scotland, I have to say. So we've a very enviable position, and I, as the local senior officer, a very enviable position that I don't have that concern. In terms of firefighter numbers, it's always a difficult conversation to have in that the chief officer has the overall responsibility for the operational matters of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. And whilst I can make you aware of those numbers, it's how we then have the conversation thereafter. But in terms of Dumfries and Galloway, what I can tell you is that we do have sufficient numbers, and that everything that we had in terms of a response prior to Fire Scotland still remains. We still have the same specialist skills and the same ability to respond. And in fact, I would even argue that we potentially have additional resources, because I can call on specialist resources from all over the west of Scotland, and we have done. In terms of response times, it's not something that I actually collate or report on, and I can reassure you that the move to the new control centre in Johnson has not had any impact on that at all. It is the same mobilising systems as we had previously. It has taken a little bit of time, as you would expect, for a consolidation of two control rooms to get together, and it is different, but it in no way has impacted on service delivery.
Thank you, Hamish. If there are no further questions, we'll move to the recommendation. Members are asked to scrutinise performance report for Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, 1st of April 2016 to 31st of March 2017. Thank you. You're not off the hook yet, Hamish. Shall move on to item 7. Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, Dumfries and Galloway review and scrutiny of 2014 to 17 local plan and consultation on the new draft local plan. We have a report before us which outlines the new draft local plan for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. For Dumfries and Galloway, the subcommittee's discussions today will be noted, and together with feedback from consultation with the area committees, will inform the preparation of a draft Dumfries and Galloway Council response to the consultation, which will be presented to full Council for consideration and agreement at its meeting on 26 September. Hamish will provide some background to the development of the draft plan and then take questions and comments from members. Thank you, Hamish.
Thanks, Chair. If I can begin by saying that actually I was a little nervous about doing the review of the local plan, given the context in which the local plan locally we got noted rather than agreed the last time it went through. But I have to say, in doing it, it's been a very useful exercise, and given some of the comments that members made earlier about the stats and where Dumfries and Galloway is in terms of a kind of benchmarking. It's a very informal benchmarking, but it certainly gives you an indicator of where Dumfries and Galloway is within a Scottish context. And I think this is a very powerful document for us moving forward, and has been in terms of informing the development of the new priorities within the draft local plan for your consideration. In terms of the review, this was a mandatory requirement that we had to do a review within the first 3 years, and also because the strategic plan had been reviewed. So because there was a new strategic plan, we had to review the local plan that we had in place. So that's why it's here. This was actually completed before the 1st of April, but this is the first opportunity we've had to bring it to the committee. You will see from it that the outcomes of the review have demonstrated how we have determined our proposed priorities within our draft new local plan, and Ian beside me is going to give you a presentation that will give you a bit more detail and, more importantly, how that fits into a local context and how we see the benefits of those outcomes affecting the local area. So, as the Chair said, I'll pass it over to Ian. He'll do his presentation, and then I'll take any questions or observations you have at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Understand that many people here today are possibly new to the police and fire scene, and there is also some people from the existing times. So what I'll do is, when I'm actually going through the draft local plan, I'll try and take it right from the very beginning and how it's actually formed, and it gives a good foundation of where the actual final product. It shows you the foundations. As our LSO, Hamish McGee, said, where does the Fire and Rescue Plan originate? Well, it's required under the Fire Scotland Act 2005 that we've got to prepare a fire and rescue plan for each local authority in Scotland. The first local plan, as we know, was published in April 2014, and what that done was it directed the service through its initial transformation phase, and also tried to portray a strong sense of local accountability within the national organisation. Although we're a national organisation, we're sitting here today with Dumfries and Galloway Council members, and that's the way that we want to do it. We want to have a really strong bond there. So the other thing is the local planning landscape continues to evolve, and we will always protect the most vulnerable people in our communities. We want to improve outcomes through collaboration in the community and with our partners. So the review provided information on how well we're performing against existing priorities, and it also highlights areas for continued improvement and opportunities that may exist. What we see in front of us here is how we actually get to the local plan. First of all, as most of you will be aware, the national outcomes, it's got 15 national outcomes, and it provides a clear structure for our priorities to be delivered. Then we've got the justice strategy for Scotland. That provides a vision for a Scottish justice system, and it helps people lead proactive lives in safe and secure communities. And that's what our service is about. We then come down into our Fire and Rescue Framework document, and that is basically the statutory document. It sets the priorities for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service for carrying out its statutory duties and other functions, and that is what we do as our core job. And again, from there, we've got our strategic plan, annual operating plan, and service delivery plans, local plans, and directorate plans. And that's where we are today with the actual local plan. The said, and as Hamish has already commented on, as well as the Fire Scotland Act, the Fire and Rescue, the Police and Fire Reform Scotland Act 2012, it puts an increased emphasis on the need to prepare a local authority area plan, and that's what we're here to do. The new draft local plan for Dumfries and Galloway, it was formed following review of the strategic plan in 2016, and as you can see there from the slide, there is times there when the plan has to be reviewed by order of the Scottish ministers, but that one there, when the new strategic plan is approved. So that is why we're actually doing it. Okay. And it instigates a timely requirement, as we've already said, to carry out a mandatory review of all local fire rescue service plans. So, how do you form a new plan? And this is the important part. And this is where we take all the information that we have got. So it's through analysis of the current operational activities and trends and listening to what the public have to say. As I say, we've done the review, and as Hamish has already reiterated, we have got some great feedback from the review. And from that, we're able to form a robust local fire and rescue plan for the future. Some things there. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service respond on average to 1,460 incidents within Dumfries and Galloway annually. That is quite a lot. In 2015-16, this has actually risen to 1,744, as you can see from the slide there. From the inception of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, this has been an increase in 27%. Okay? However, false alarms, they are the most common type. That is 49% of all mobilisations within Dumfries and Galloway. Also accounts for 32% fires and 19% of non-fire emergencies. But this is increasing, and as you've heard Hamish say before, this is likely to increase in the future with our different responsibilities and different jobs that we're actually doing through corresponding and supporting other emergency services for gaining access and our colleagues in the ambulance service. Now, the false alarms, as I say, I'll come on to that in a little second, but we are working to reduce that quite considerably. And I'll go into the reasons why that has actually increased in a second or two. For consideration, some of these increases are due to the procedural changes and differences in recording within the new Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. It doesn't necessarily mean an increase in incident numbers. And again, I will come on to that, okay? Thanks. And again, this slide here just gives a different perspective on the information that I've actually given. As you can see there, in the green section, 49% to 53%, that's the growth. Gross largest in this area. The reason why, though, it may be a little bit more because the 53% also includes that actual year in the 4-year ratio. Okay. Growth in non-fire emergencies. As I said, we respond to different types of incidents, making entry and corresponding. And because of the increase in other areas, it does look there that our actual fire, our fire percentage is going down, but it remains pretty constant. It's not growing in Dumfries and Galloway, it remains pretty constant, but I can assure you that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service will continue to focus on fires as a priority within that region. So the Fire and Rescue Framework for Scotland highlights areas where reductions are required. These are set out as our targets, right? And that's what we kind of class as our KPIs. And again, it's kind of reflected in our scrutiny report that we've just given previously. So by comparing operational activity and the priorities contained within the Framework for Scotland, we can see that we have been doing pretty well, okay? We will discuss every priority separately, but areas to note within this slide are, first of all, the data for the 2016-17 period has not been verified and is not likely to change significantly. And the reason why is because we work with so many partners in Procurator Fiscal, Police, we do case conferences, case studies after fatalities or injuries, then it takes a little bit of time for this information to filter through. So just, I mean, although it's not verified, the numbers we're working with here is pretty small and it's not likely to change any percentages dramatically. As I said, we're dealing with extremely small figures and some areas refocus us, right? And it gives us an emphasis that this is an ongoing task, okay? We can't rest on our laurels. As I said before, the rise in UFAS, possibly down to a change in operating procedures following the merger of our fire controls. But again, once again, I can inform you that this by no means increases any risks to the members of the public. So evidence and feedback from the public and data analysis help us for a new local fire and rescue plan. We set our objectives dependent on the evidence for each priority area as highlighted within the Fire and Rescue Framework. We will continue to measure our performance and review regularly, ensuring that we meet the priorities and objectives identified through the community planning. Okay. So our first priority, as we've said, is domestic fire safety. And again, this has been formed from evidence from the review. Okay. What we're comparing ourselves here is to a 3-year Scottish average, right? So it's a 3-year Scottish average, and we will see that as we go through these slides. And just very quickly, just to go over the priorities. Accidental dwelling fires, you've got a density map there. You can see hotspot areas in Dumfries, Annan and Stranraer. And that's, again, that's a kind of direct correlation to where the actual members of the public are within Dumfries and Galloway. It's taken per head of population, and we are sitting at 6.38 per 10,000 people. Okay, and you can see us there in the red bar on the right-hand chart there. And that's taken from the population of 150,000 people in Dumfries and Galloway. Notes there, 82% automatic fire detection present. When we go to a domestic dwelling, 82% of these premises have fire detection present in the actual premises. 58% of them have actually raised the alarm in a fire, and that's not to say that the actual alarms aren't working, but it might be that somebody's cooking and they've actually detected the fire first before the alarm goes off. And we would consider that as quite it's a very, very good rate considering the years gone by. But again, we won't rest on our laurels, and this is something that our community action team will continue to advance in the future. This is quite an important slide again, following on, again, still stay within domestic safety. We're looking at fire fatalities and casualties. They're well below the national average, as you can see there, from accidental fires. But again, areas to note, 60 plus years of age. This is when we're getting the elderly, and they are a vulnerable target group, and they account for 61% of our dwelling fire fatalities and casualties. So this is an area that we target, and again, that's what's in the actual plan, and this is where we find this information. There is differences in male and female, and we've looked at the rest of Scotland, and we don't understand why. There's no actual correlation. There's no commonality. But as you can see there, in the 60-year category, more males, and in the 80 to 89-year category, more females. Okay. Overall, male casualties, though, account for 58%. Although the most common cause of injury can be attributed to medical conditions or illness, the most common cause of the fire is through cooking. So the two of them together, these are areas that we are actually targeting. And as you can see in the graph in the top right-hand side, the trends around lunchtime, dinner time, and early morning, just after midnight, these are the times associated when most cooking takes place. And again, that directly links into our findings that cooking is one of the main factors. Okay. And there you've got the priorities. They are within the actual the plan. So through the actions contained within the draft fire and rescue plan, we will, and again, that's the four there. I'm not going to go through all them just now. That they are within the document, but we are looking after the safety and well-being of the residents of Dumfries and Galloway through our actions there. On priority 2, intentional harm and injury, again, nearly 1 in 5 incidents attended by the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service in Dumfries and Galloway are non-fire emergencies. However, non-fire emergencies has 4 times the rate of fire casualties. An interesting fact here, though, and it's maybe a highlight in the success that some of the projects that we're involved with, and one I'll give you an example is the road safety, Dumfries and Galloway Road Safety Partnership. If you look there in 2013-14, road traffic collisions accounted was 89, and the non-fatal casualties in the same year was 81. However, if we jump on now till 2016-17, we had 87, which isn't really a reduction so much on the actual road traffic collisions, but however, the non-fatal road traffic casualties has halved down to 42. And that's a combination, maybe cars are getting a lot better, but also the work that, again, the Dumfries and Galloway Council and Transport Scotland have been doing in their local roads to try and make them safer. We're learning by mistakes, and we will continue to do that through the Road Safety Partnership. And again, that is in line with the Vision Zero, which is the Scottish Government's framework for road safety. Once again, priorities, unintentional harm and injury, which included that. These are the areas that we have addressed within the actual planning document. And through the actions contained, we will, again, reduce the social and economic cost and intentional harm and injury. Try and make the public a lot safer. Priority 3, deliberate fire setting. Again, as you can see there from the density map, it's mostly correlated round about Dumfries. But per head of population, we are very, very low compared to the rest of Scotland. We do not have a major issue, as you could see from the previous scrutiny reports. Secondary fires, these are fires, minor fires, including like burning of rubbish, grass and derelict properties. Secondary fires account for 72% of all those deliberate fires. And again, these are areas that we were working with our partners in the police and the council to try and reduce these through various youth engagement schemes. Priority 3, as I said, this is what we're going to set out, and this is a direct lift again from the actual the plan itself. And there's great emphasis on working with partners and being proactive and active in responsible citizenship across Dumfries and Galloway. Come on to priority 4, non-domestic fire safety. Non-domestic fire safety, again, density is around Dumfries, and that aligns with the actual population density of the region. Of all fires, it's only 4% of non-domestic properties. Okay, that's what it counts for. And 81% of these fires are within non-domestic properties occur within what we class as relevant premises. And that is the premises that fall within the Fire Scotland Act 2005 and the Fire Safety Scotland Regulations 2006. These are the premises that we go out and we audit and we provide feedback to them. So these are your commercial premises. That is very low compared to the rest of Scotland. And again, this is a direct lift from the plan, and again, what we're trying to do is enable industry and commercial and service sectors to maintain business continuity and employment across Dumfries and Galloway, but do it in a safe manner. And that is what we're aiming to do. It's all about engagement, and that's what we'll continue to do. Priority 5, unwanted fire alarm signals. Dumfries and Galloway still has one of the lowest compared to other areas in Scotland. That is shown again against the Scottish 3-year average. And again, we're the second lowest there in the whole of Scotland. Right. However, we have had a rise in false alarms and unwanted fire alarm signals due to the changes in procedures following the merger of fire controls. There is no problems with the way appliances are mobilised. However, through the standardisation of procedures, we had to come to one fit for the time being, and the former Strathclyde policy was implemented as the safest default. Okay, and that is the safest default. So what we actually find in Dumfries and Galloway, we are actually sending more appliances to these instances, right? So nobody is at any greater risk. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service now, however, are working with our UFAS, our Unwanted Fire Alarm Demand Reduction Policy, to reduce false alarm call-outs through Scotland in a safe manner. And what we are doing is we are engaging increasingly with the duty holders of these buildings, and we are starting to see the figure plateau, and we are starting to see it drop. And we will continue to work, engage with businesses. And one of the main areas when we were actually doing a review, as it says there, UFAS activity is prevalent between 0800 and 1500. So why are these alarms not going off during the night? So it must be something to do with a human element and a management element. And that is why we are targeting these areas, okay? And we believe that we can reduce these, and this is what we will do. And hopefully within the next year or two, we will see the actual UFAS drop to back down to the same level or even below what we had previously, and that is through engagement. As I said, we need to engage with duty holders. 35% of all UFAS, unwanted fire alarm signals types, come from 3 types of premises, and these are the ones that we are focusing carefully on. Residential homes, and we will continue to give home fire safety checks and advice to the members of the public. But the other 2 are hospitals and care facilities, and also schools. And again, we have a good working relationship at this moment in time, and we're working with NHS Scotland, NHS Dumfries and Galloway, and also Dumfries and Galloway Council to reduce these. And again, priority 5, as I say, direct lift from the actual, from the plan through the actions contained within the draft local fire and rescue plan. We'll continue, and we're looking to minimise disruption to the businesses and services continuity through Dumfries and Galloway. Finally, priority 6. The Fire Scotland Act 2005 and the Fire Additional Functions Scotland Order 2005 defines the duties and responsibilities for the Fire and Rescue Service in relation to responding to emergencies. These are areas that, these are things that we actually do, and they're again a direct lift from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service framework document. And to make sure that we deliver what we're promising or deliver what we're planning on doing, and to make sure that we strive to continue to provide the best service for Dumfries and Galloway. These are the areas that we're targeting. So it's training and maintenance of firefighter skills, operational intelligence gathering, so that our firefighters are safe when they go to fires. We can respond to fires better. We can respond to different fires in buildings. Ongoing recruitment and retain duty system for firefighters. And again, the question has been asked before. This is something we're on top of. Civil contingencies planning and preparation. Again, that's in a joint activity with all our partner agencies, and the development of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service role. we are an evolving entity within Scotland. We're getting new powers all the time, we're getting new jobs, and we have to stay on top of that. And again, on priority 6, under operational resilience and preparedness, this has been well documented, and the areas that we are going to address are in the actual plan. And again, this covers a multitude of things, and it's not just our attending fires, road traffic accidents, unwanted fire alarm signals. We have got to think in the future, and this is what we're doing now. We've got to be prepared for flooding incidents. We've got to be prepared for terrorist attacks, whatever may be thrown at us. And this is what we work towards, strive towards. So the new local fire and rescue plan, as you've got a copy there, it has been drafted by the Dumfries and Galloway Local Senior Officer Area, LSO area. To get it right, we wish to seek the views of as many people and members of the public as possible, and we need as much information and feedback. Consultation has been opened, and I believe it closes on the 3rd of September. Is that still the case? It will be delivered to the meeting on sorry.
So just so you're aware, it's part of your report, we've actually agreed that there'll be an extension to the consultation period for the council because of the meeting schedules. So the dates are contained within your report. Members, I know that was a really weighty and a meaty presentation that was given, but I felt it was necessary to do so. I didn't want you thinking that we just sat down in a room and come up with some spurious priorities that were put into a plan. We wanted to make sure that you were aware that they were robust, that they were evidence-led, and that they provided some ambition, and particularly reflected our ambition to become a wider participant in a number of areas rather than just being fire and rescue. Safety and well-being of communities is our priority, and as I'm sure you've seen in the press lately, we're looking to get into areas such as dementia, working with people who are the most vulnerable in our society. The other thing just to say is you will also see within your report of the review is we did do an extensive engagement session previously with communities, with yourselves and with staff, and you'll have seen some of the feedback, and hopefully we've built that into the draft local plan that we have there. And at that, I'll pass it over to any questions or observations.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Thank you, Hamish. We'll now open up to members' debate.
Thank you, Chair. I've just a couple of issues in the report. The first is in item 7 on the local context with regard to accidental dwelling fires. You say that in terms of fire-related activity, accidental dwelling fires have shown a sharp downward trend within these fires, accounting for only 1/3 of the total number of the same fires 2 years ago, and that would appear to be reflected on page 59 in the table there that you showed us in the slide, which said that there were 90 in 16-17. However, in item 6 on page 41, it gives the figure for accidental dwelling fires as 103, and I wondered which was actually correct.
As I think Ian had said, in some of the figures that were in the 2016-17 were yet to be validated and quality assured, and therefore there were some correlation. Yeah. The other part of it is in terms of when the report has actually been published and submitted, that there is a differentiation between the two. So I apologise for that, but in general principle, the actual circumstances behind it and the percentages are not significantly changed because of the...
Sorry. Yeah. Apologies. What we try to do with the actual presentation here, maybe this is kind of remiss of myself, what we tried to do was also include the 16-17 figures within the actual presentation. Whereas if you actually look at, the previous review document and where we actually take the statistics and the figures from the to form the fire and rescue plan, you will notice that we deliberately did not put the 16 and 17 figures in, again because some of the figures are still a little bit spurious.
If you look at page, well, now it's page 41, it does have the figures for 16 for all accidental dwelling fires, and it has that in fiscal year as being 103.
Yeah, the difference is the fact that this review had to be done by the 1st of April 2016.
So it's just a difference in dates?
It's just it's the difference in dates, because what you will find that your report is actually is the validated one. It's the one that has been done with the figures that have been provided to us in July. So all of that has gone through the system. What happens is we have I'm going to start and use acronyms, so I've got to be careful, an incident recording system, which is automated. So if a watch manager from Annan goes to a fire, he automatically generates an incident, within this system. He's on a retained duty system, so he may not get to actually filling that in for 2 weeks. So he sits there, fills it in, and then it gets fired into the national system. We take our information from the national system, and the national system then has to be quality assured, and it's an 8-week turnaround. So that is the difference in the two. Unfortunately, the ones that are accurate are the ones that are in the annual one. The ones in terms of the review were the best we had for 16, 17, but it's the fact that we brought the two documents together. But thank you for bringing that up, because it's...
Yeah, that's great. There was another thing. This was actually about item 5, the unwanted fire alarms. Now, you were stating that some of the reason that that had an increase was a difference in procedure and a standardisation on the Strathclyde model, which deploys firefighters and fire equipment to any fire alarm. And my understanding from what was said at the Nithsdale Area Committee was that prior to that in Dumfries and Galloway, their control room, there was some sort of conversation between the control operatives and whoever, the building and so on, which could actually sometimes identify if somebody had set up, been making toast and set off the fire alarm. So it wasn't necessary to deploy the firefighters and equipment to those sorts of incidents. And I think you described it as being the safest default, but I'm slightly quibble with that, actually. If firefighters and fire equipment are being sent out to very unnecessary events, first of all, there could be something serious happens at the same time, and people's time and equipment is being used up on something unnecessary when something serious might be happening. But also, you've got fire engines speeding through the streets to attend a non-incident, which could be a safety issue both for fire staff and for members of the public.
Your point's well made.
Could we not influence, could Dumfries and Galloway's procedures not influence the central procedure rather than the other way around?
They have. They have, absolutely they have. And that's the whole point to what you've just said there is exactly the position that we are at now. You'll understand that moving from 8 fire and rescue services to 1 was a very complex situation, and they wanted to make sure that communities were as safe as they possibly could. Your observations about what we previously had in Dumfries and Galloway was that we had robust management arrangements, we'd had conversations with duty holders, and we had put in systems and approaches that are the ones that we are now coming back to. But we needed to mature as an organisation to the point where we could actually do that. And we are now at that point, and the policies and the procedures that Dumfries and Galloway previously had are the ones that are being re-implemented. Now, what we have a real win with locally, and we're moving very quickly on, is because the people we're talking to, we've had these agreements with them in the past, so we're very quickly getting those numbers down. As Ian said earlier, they're plateauing and starting to come down. I agree with you in terms of that there is that question mark about, increasing weight of response would put other members of the public in danger in terms of blue light journeys. Absolutely, you're right. But I would also wish to be assured that, where we thought we had an incident, that we had the right number of appliances going to in case it was a fire. And that's the default position we had, that we approached for that interim period. But we're now at that point, we're getting back to where we should be.
Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks. A lot of what I said in the previous thing, I would suggest, I know it still applies. There's something that's striking for me. I've got a number of different hats to wear in the council, and every single one of your priorities meet the priorities of the Integrated Joint Board, the Integration of Health Social Care. And I can't, for the love of me, because I'm board member of that, in fact I'm the vice chair of it, ever having had any input from Scottish Fire and Rescue. Now, I'm not saying you didn't have it behind the scenes, right? But I think it needs to be seen that you've got a big impact in it. I'm just picking up a number of these things. I see Hamish is poised, ready to come in and answer. But I'm thinking, you know, the smoke alarms, the preventative stuff, the assistive technology, and I know in different areas I've got different methods and different types of equipment. And a kind of local one myself, my mother, for example, her smoke alarm is linked to care call in the borders. And I don't know if the fire alarms here are linked to our care call system. They are. So that's obviously a national system that's been applied locally. Is that a fair assumption?
No, there are different arrangements for different, you know, in different areas, but absolutely, yes, it is locally. Care call is incorporated into it. In terms of the integration of health and social care agenda, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service are engaging locally with all areas to try and see what benefit we could have in terms of that joint partnership working. The reason I'm smiling and was wanting to push the button is that we're now currently engaged with NHS through Julie White. I'm just speaking to her at this very initial stages about how we could come in and actually make a big impact. We believe that you've heard of home fire safety visits. Well, we believe we should take the fire out now and we should be calling them home safety visits. We are very skilled at risk assessment. We're very skilled at you know, coming in and reinsuring people, and we're welcomed by a lot of elderly who see us as being one of the emergency services that, you know, we can gain access and gain trust. So we think we have a major role to play in that, and I intend to push that as hard as I can in that agenda locally. And whilst it doesn't specifically say it within the plan, I'm glad that you've picked out in it that it actually aligns itself to those priorities.
Thank you. Councillor Fairbairn.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that, Hamish. Thanks, Ian. I picked up on Ian's point where he was mentioning police case conferences in relation to road fatalities. Is that a local thing or is that a national thing?
Case conferences, any major incident such as fire fatalities or even fire injuries where you go to case conferences and case studies, what we do is we come together from all the partner agencies. It was developed certainly in Dumfries and Galloway prior to going to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, but it's something that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service have carried on. There is a policy there and it is a national policy, although local authority areas will do it differently. And so far, we're usually getting them completed within the first few months of that actual happening, albeit we've still got to wait on the evidence coming through. But certainly we have got none outstanding. This has been carried out in Dumfries and Galloway. It's under the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and also the local authority procedures, and it's something that we've carried on from Dumfries and Galloway.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hamish, just a couple of questions. One question, in terms of future scrutiny by the subcommittee of the plan, under domestic fire safety, it's already been discussed in terms of vulnerable people, but promoting and undertaking home fire safety visits. How do you deem who is at risk? How do you get that information? And how will this be presented in future to the subcommittee? And also, going back to that dreaded paragraph from the previous plan on the location of central and national support services in the region. Have you any comment to make on that?
The first one, in terms of the home fire safety visits, they are done now on a risk basis. We have an opportunity, once the local plan is put in place, to look at the KPIs or the performance indicators that you wish to be seen, and we don't have a problem in terms of being able to bring that to you, because it's something we use internally anyway. There would be a little bit of, I'll call it education, in terms of that as we risk assess individuals, there are certain interventions, you know, it's either go for a visit and fit a smoke alarm, or it's give advice or whatever. and there's those categorisations, but we can certainly do that in the future, and we can build that into any future performance report. In terms of the location of centralised resources, that is an area that is reserved for the Chief Fire Officer and the management team. I can, through yourselves as well, try to influence some of that, but as such, in terms of a local plan, the local plan are about local outcomes in terms of performance, that we can be held against. That isn't part of what I'm being asked to put in that. I know that isn't the answer that members are looking for.
No, I appreciate the point you're making, though. Councillor Lever.
It's just in terms of, I suppose, it falls under operational resilience, flooding. It's obviously, we've been very fortunate this winter, but I'm thinking about the winter before. Was it Hurricane Frank when that hit the region and all of the southwest of Scotland? How can you increase the resilience in terms of that? Because that must make your services very stretched over a very large area. So how do you actually focus into ways you put the effort first? Because obviously if you're a householder and your house has been flooded, then you're the top priority as far as you're concerned. So how can you actually increase the resilience in terms of that?
In terms of our operational response, we've had a well-versed operational response to flooding right across the area of Dumfries and Galloway for a number of years, and we still work very closely with the council. So we've got flood pods in both Dumfries and in Newton Stewart. We also have 7 first, I'm trying to remember the name of it, it's level 2 flood response, but it's stations who are specifically trained and have equipment in terms of flood response. We've also got a boat team at Newton Stewart, and we are about to launch a boat team in Dumfries. So that's specific to Dumfries and Galloway. Over and above that, there are a whole host of resources that in the west of Scotland or nationally that can be brought into bear, which previously we had to do through mutual assistance. Now I just need to pick up the phone and it comes. So in terms of our operational response, I think we're pretty resilient in terms of fire and rescue. Where I think there's a trick to play, and I think it's something that we wish to get involved in the future, is working with communities to make communities resilient themselves. I have, again, an enviable number of fire stations in most of the major areas, most of the major towns in Dumfries and Galloway. It's a focal point, and I have spoken and will continue to speak with the local authority about how they might be better used in terms of supporting that kind of community resilience, whether that be flooding or whether it be to the wider adverse weather events such as snow, etc. That's the ambition. So, and I'm confident it's captured within that at kind of quite a high level.
Thank you. Councillor Howie.
Just reference to domestic fires. Do you record how many are alcohol related? And if so, have you any mechanism of reporting individuals into support services to address alcohol issues?
This is an extremely it's an extremely hard fact to it's extremely hard to capture if there is any alcohol related and drug related, and that's all down to basically information that we are given, because we can attend fires and we can have our own idea or opinions of if it is alcohol or drug related. However, it's got to come through a medical side of things. So if they're put into hospital, we find it pretty difficult sometimes to actually gain information from NHS or from private records, from the private records, to say that yes, this is actually alcohol related. However, prior to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, the Strathclyde Fire and Rescue Service done a report called Scotland Together, and it basically covered the whole of Scotland. And what they done was they got permission to gain this, to gain the records, and that was where they took the information, and this is how we come about, as we were saying before, with the home fire safety checks, about speaking to the most vulnerable. And that's how that has been targeted. But in Dumfries and Galloway, it's pretty difficult to start to go through people's medical records or through the actual reasons why. And unfortunately, a lot of that information isn't captured. It's an unfortunate thing.
If it's reassuring for you, we do work very closely with our partners. And where there are concerns, we, rather than it being a formal route, informally, we make those, comments. And then other agencies, through the MASH, etc., from the police, they then take that forward. And whether it's suitable, they will make interventions. But it's just as Ian says, it's very difficult to identify. We're not medical practitioners. We're not the professionals that can identify whether someone has a problem or not, or whether it's related to it. So.
But again, as we were saying before, through the case studies and case conferences, these are areas that will be discussed, and if they are known to other services, then yes, it will be advanced in that way with a multi-agency approach, trying to do the best for these people. And just a statistic throughout Scotland, there was a time when we looked at a certain number of fire deaths throughout Scotland under a certain period of time, and out of the 153 fire deaths in Scotland during that period, 149 were known to one agency or another. So what we've got to do is we've got to actually work smarter to address these problems, because if somebody else knew about it, why have we not been informed? And these are areas that we are looking to explore currently. But certainly, just for a run-of-the-mill fire, has somebody had alcohol in a one night and has that caused a fire? It's pretty hard for us to determine that, but we will work with other personnel through case studies, case conferences to address the problems. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks. Just a throwaway comment. I think microwaves have a lot to be answered for the reduction in that. The chip bans at midnight seem to being the decrease. The serious question, though, is that given what happened in London quite recently, and there's quite a lot of activity, I know, just, I'm not sure if it's the right question here, but it's the only chance we get to ask you, is the interaction between yourself and the landlords and strategic housing about the fire safety and your recommendations and stuff like that, how it's taken forward. A kind of update without, maybe should have been AOCB, Dougie, but you take my point. I think it would go a long way again to allaying any fears that we've got a big problem in Dumfries and Galloway.
You don't have a big problem in Dumfries and Galloway. That's the start of. We have a very good relationship with the social landlords, have done for a number of years. In fact, the man that's sitting beside me here is the person who's been out at nights, most nights, I think last week, where he's been going round, where people may have concern. And all we're trying to do is reassure people that there are no concerns, but that we are picking up wee bits and pieces and making recommendations, and the social landlords have taken that on board and they've been very responsible. But ultimately, we do not have any multi-storey flats in this area. We don't have any concerns about them, and we have every ability to respond to them and to, where necessary, save life. It's a great position for me at the moment, because I continue to be asked to provide statistics about multi-storey flats, and it's a great response. It takes me all of 2 seconds to write it down. Nil response is a lovely position, but notwithstanding that, I'll always put in the caveat that we are working with our partners to alleviate fears where people may have concerns. And we have generated a large number of home fire safety visits out of those visits that Ian's been taking, and we will make sure that we get round to doing every one of them.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, are you content to move on to the recommendations? Okay. To note the 3-year review of Dumfries and Galloway Local Fire and Rescue Plan 2014 to 17. Noted. To scrutinise Dumfries and Galloway Draft Local Fire and Rescue Plan 2017 and consider consultation questions as detailed at Appendix 4. Yes. To note that full council will be asked to consider and agree the council's response to the consultation at its meeting on 26 September 2017. This extension to the deadline of 3rd September 2017 having been granted by local senior officer. And happy with that, yes. And 4, noted the final draft Dumfries and Galloway Local Fire and Rescue Plan 2017 will be presented to full council for agreement on 14th of December 2018. Okay.
Do we not normally make some recommendation to full council?
Just to assist, Chairman, purely in the hands of the subcommittee. As you know, this document is currently being considered by area committees. It's here today to be considered by yourself. We've certainly captured the main points that members have made. If there's any specific points members wish to make today that you feel that need to be captured, happy for that to be undertaken just now, but reassure members that any of the points that have been made, we've captured that along with those from the area committees. That will then be submitted as the draft response to be considered by full council in September.
Chair, I'm happy to take Derek at his word, and he'll make sure it's all encapsulated in the big report to full council. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. And with that, I would like to thank Hamish and Ian for coming along today. Thank you for your candour. Thank you for your comprehensive report and responding to the questions. Moving on to item 8, any other business deemed urgent by the Chairman. I have no urgent business and would like to thank members for their attendance today. Thank you very much.